first time Lyra laid eyes on Kael, the air around her vibrated with tension, as if the very fabric of the pack's hierarchy had been altered, and the rules that governed her existence had been rewritten. As a newly minted Omega within Ironmark pack, Lyra had grown accustomed to being overlooked. Her exceptional tracking skills and keen senses often went unacknowledged in favor of more senior members. She couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy that simmered just below the surface, fueling a quiet resentment toward the pack's patriarch, Alpha King Riker. Lyra's thoughts drifted back to the fateful day when Riker had publicly berated her for a minor infraction, branding her unreliable and unsuitable for high-level assignments. The memory still stung within her, not just from the words he'd spoken, but also because she knew it was baseless. The weight of his disdain settled upon her like a shroud. Her stomach churned as Lyra navigated the treacherous forest paths, the moon casting eerie shadows on the trees. She clutched a small pouch containing a few dried berries and a water skin, rationing each precious drop to sustain herself through the night. The wilderness seemed determined to test her resolve, the snapping twigs beneath her feet echoing through the silence like a mocking whisper. Suddenly, Lyra's ears picked up the soft rustling of leaves ahead. A small figure emerged from the darkness, stumbling toward her with an air of desperation. It was Elara, one of Riker's own beta wolves, who had gone missing several days ago under unclear circumstances. "Elara, what's wrong?" Lyra asked, her voice laced with a mixture of sharp wit and quiet desperation, her words often laced with a subtle steeliness. Elara's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route before locking onto Lyra's face. As Lyra's gaze locked onto Elara's frantic expression, a dark shape emerged from the shadows behind her, its presence seeming to draw the very light out of the forest, and Lyra's instincts screamed that Cassius was standing just out of sight, his eyes fixed on Elara with an unnerving intensity that made Lyra's blood run cold, and she whispered a single chilling word: "Cassius!" Lyra's eyes locked onto Elara's frantic expression, her gaze snapping to attention as she spotted her friend darting towards Cassius. The air seemed to vibrate with tension as Cassius emerged from the shadows, his presence a cold, dark cloud that suffocated the forest. Elara's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route, but Cassius's gaze snagged hers, holding her in place like a vice. "Cassius!" Lyra spat, the words slicing through the air, sharp as a blade. The wind carried Cassius's name, echoing off the trees like a death knell. Lyra's eyes scanned the surrounding area, searching for a way out, but the dense foliage seemed to close in around her, trapping her with Cassius and Elara. Her instincts screamed at her to move, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. Her toes curled over the edge of the earth like claws. She spotted the parchment clutched in Elara's hand, the words, "Asterian's Balance," scrawled across it in messy handwriting. Lyra's gut twisted with a mix of anger and protectiveness toward her friend, her fists clenching beneath her sleeves. Elara stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear, and Lyra's anger boiled over. Cassius's eyes never left Elara's face as he moved closer, his movements fluid and calculated. "You shouldn't have followed Elara here," he said, his voice a smooth, velvet drawl that seemed to wrap around her like a shroud. Lyra's skin crawled with disgust, her nails biting into her palm. Elara's eyes darted to Lyra, and for a moment, their gazes locked, a spark of understanding passing between them. Cassius's smile, cold and calculating, was the only thing that broke the connection. Lyra trudged through the forest, her boots sinking into the damp earth with each step. The recent full moon ritual still lingered in her mind, but a faint memory of Cassius's mocking smile lingered on her lips. Elara's eyes flickered to Lyra as they walked, a fleeting connection that vanished when Cassius chimed in. "The balance must be maintained," Cassius said, his voice low and even with a hint of condescension, "or else the pack would collapse." Lyra's stomach twisted into a familiar knot as she listened. She knew that phrase from her research on the pack's ancient rituals. Balance meant control, and control was what Cassius was pushing for. As they approached their territory's edge, Lyra noticed Kael watching them from a distance. He didn't seem to be part of the conversation, but his presence drew her attention like a magnet. She felt a sudden surge of guilt, reminding herself that she'd been too focused on uncovering Cassius's secrets to consider her own feelings. As they stepped into the clearing, Lyra's eyes scanned the familiar landscape and landed on something peculiar. A small, hand-carved wooden box, partially buried in the soil. The intricate pattern seemed out of place among the pack's traditional symbols. Her gaze lingered for a moment before she tore her attention away from Cassius, her shoulders tightening. "We need to find Elara," Lyra said, her tone sharp and decisive, but a hint of frustration beneath. Cassius raised an eyebrow, his voice smooth and calculated. We've been over this, Lyra. We can't just go chasing after her like some kind of hero. Lyra's eyes flashed with anger, but she bit back the retort, her words laced with subtle steeliness. I've been asking the wrong question. Cassius merely smiled, his condescension still lurking beneath his polished exterior. I'd be happy to enlighten you, Lyra. As they continued toward their pack's lodge, the tension between them hung in the air like a challenge.
Lyra's feet pounded against the earth as she kept pace with Cassius, her eyes fixed on his retreating form. The rhythm of her footsteps was steady, but her breathing quickened beneath her determination. The symbol from the library echoed in her mind, a forgotten message hinting at secrets buried beneath the pack's surface. As they approached the lodge, Lyra noticed the elder pack member lingering near the entrance. His eyes flickered to Cassius before drifting back to his own feet. The lines on his face deepened, and he spoke in a low, grave tone. Balance is a luxury we can ill afford, the elder said. Price haunted Lyra's thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that her pack was teetering on the edge of a precipice. Her steps quickened, the crunch of gravel beneath her boots the only sound breaking the silence. Cassius didn't bother to look back. He vanished into the lodge, leaving Lyra with an unsettling sense of unease. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay. The air seemed heavy, weighed down by unseen forces. Lyra's grip on her pack tightened as she slowed her pace, her senses on high alert. Her shoulders hunched, and her eyes scanned the surroundings with a growing sense of unease. Something doesn't feel right, she muttered to herself, her tone laced with desperation. The elder pack member's eyes snapped back to Lyra, his gaze piercing. And as Cassius's voice echoed from within the lodge, "You'll have to find another way to balance the scales, Lyra." The elder's voice dropped to a whisper, but at what cost? The wind died, the silence deafening, as Lyra's packmate vanished into the darkness, leaving her with the unmistakable sense that she was staring into the abyss.
Lyra's gaze snapped back to her pack members, her eyes locking onto Sable, who seemed frozen in place, his face pale beneath his tan skin. The wind died down, and an unsettling silence enveloped them as Cassius Blackwood emerged from the lodge, his voice dripping with condescension. I told you we couldn't afford to have you poking around in that library, Lyra, Cassius said, his words laced with a subtle sneer, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. You're not exactly the most stable mind when it comes to our pack's history. Lyra's skin prickled, and she felt a familiar knot form in her chest as Cassius's words struck a nerve. She bit back a retort, her jaw working silently as he turned to Sable and began to explain something in hushed tones. The elder's eyes seemed to be pleading for Lyra to remain still, her presence not a threat. Balance is key, Sable, Cassius said finally, his voice laced with a menacing undertone, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. If we don't maintain the equilibrium, the pack will unravel. A faint rustling sound came from within the nearby bushes as Kael's scent wafted through the air, mingling with the earthy smell of damp soil and decaying leaves. Lyra's breath quickened, her senses coming alive as she caught a whiff of something else, something that made her thoughts momentarily stray. Balance is what we need, Sable, Cassius repeated, his voice measured and calculated. His words measured against the stillness of the forest. The eyes that had been hidden in the shadows now locked onto Lyra, Cassius's gaze burning with an intensity that made Sable's face go white as he took a step back. His eyes fixed on Lyra as if he saw her for the first time. Sable's eyes never left Cassius's face, her gaze burning with a mix of curiosity and unease. The air was heavy with tension, the forest's silence a palpable force that made Lyra's skin prickle. You're certain about this balance? She asked, her voice low and measured, the sharp edges of her words cutting through the air like a finely honed knife. Cassius took another step closer, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made Sable's breath catch. Balance is what we need, Lyra, he repeated, his words dripping with a condescending sweetness that made her stomach twist with discomfort. The words hung between them like a challenge, and for a moment, Lyra felt her resolve crumble beneath Cassius's steady gaze. But she pushed aside the doubts, her mind racing with possibilities. With a sudden movement, Sable backed away, his eyes still fixed on Lyra as if he saw her for the first time. We need to discuss this further, he said, his voice strained, the edges of his words like a warning. Cassius's gaze remained locked on Lyra's face, his eyes narrowing slightly as he waited for her response. In that moment, Lyra knew she was standing at the edge of something. A precipice that would change her life forever. 10 minutes! Sable muttered, his eyes flicking to a small pocket watch he'd produced from nowhere. The watch's tick echoed through the stillness, a steady heartbeat that seemed to pulse in Lyra's own chest. The watch's tick faltered, its steady heartbeat replaced by a discordant silence, and Lyra's eyes snapped to Sable's pocket watch, now still and dark as if it had been alive. Sable's eyes never left hers, his gaze burning with a silent challenge. But Lyra's gaze had shifted, her attention now fixed on the watch, its face a cold, empty void. Lyra's gaze remained fixed on Sable's pocket watch, its dark face now a stark reminder of their deceitful bargain. The sudden silence between them was oppressive, heavy with unspoken accusations. Her fingers tightened around her hand as she turned to leave, the weight of her anger and disappointment threatening to consume her. As she stepped away from Sable's outstretched hand, Lyra's thoughts careened wildly out of control. Her eyes roved over the dark, polished wood of the table, searching for a lifeline, anything to anchor herself in this chaotic whirlpool. "You're a monster, Sable," she spat, her words laced with venom and steel. "A monster with a pocket watch that's more expensive than our very lives." The room seemed to recede around her, leaving only the two of them suspended in an uncomfortable silence. Sable's eyes never wavered from hers, his gaze burning with a quiet intensity that made her skin crawl. "Ah, Lyra, always so quick to blame," he said, his voice like silk, but with a subtle edge of condescension. "I think you're just scared. Scared of what we've become, scared of what we might become." With each deliberate step, Lyra edged closer to the door, her heart thudding in time with the faint creaks of the old wooden frame. She pushed the door open, the hinges screeching in protest. "I'm not scared, Sable," she lied, her voice low and deadly. "I'm just tired of being used, tired of being a pawn in your game." Outside, night pressed against the windows like a living thing, casting long shadows across the deserted courtyard.